welcome, everybody. You're more than welcome to turn your videos on. It'd be so great to see you and meet you. Feel free to wave and write in the chat where you're tuning in from. So happy to see some new faces and some faces that have been with me from the start, and a lot of you that perhaps have read The Lost Octave, and I never even got a chance to meet you. And it's so great to host these kind of events just to create a bit of a global gathering to connect with you all. And I so appreciate you being here on this auspicious time, this auspicious occasion today. And so I hope you can feel the energies of the solstices. And I'll say solstices because I'm actually in the southern hemisphere right now. I'm actually in Indonesia, and it's a very interesting experience moving through from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, and also to get the orientation of that kind of celebration of a solstice, because all of my life I've been in the northern hemisphere. So today would traditionally be the summer solstice for me. And yet here in the southern hemisphere, it is the winter solstice, which is a really interesting component to start to think about weaving the polarities of the earth together. And so we're going to do a really amazing deep dive into this new subject, into some of these shares and this grand exploration. And so it's so great to see you all. And happy solstice. As I mentioned, in the northern hemisphere, it is the summer solstice, the peak of the sun. And in the southern hemisphere where I am, even though it's still very sunny, it is the winter solstice. And so it kind of is an interesting component, because when we think about in the northern hemisphere of Christmas time, of the winter solstice, here it is the summer solstice. So Christmas, that celebration, is celebrated in the peak of the sun, which makes a lot of sense to the mythology and the stories. And of course, today's story that we're going to be diving into about Orion is very much connected to the three wise men as part of its mythology. So let us know how you're feeling, how the energy's been, and how the year's been up until this point, because I feel as soon as we hit that fire horse celebration, we have been galloping through at tremendous speed in our collective consciousness, in our own journeys. And I'll try and share today a sort of a balance of the technical components as well as the mythology and the stories behind all of this. So for me, I feel like it's so important for us to share the balance of science with mythology. And that, of course, is leading us into this journey today of exploring this new calibration of weaving back the science of the stars, astronomy, with the star law of the stars, which is astrology. And so this is where the blend to move us through into the next age, to recalibrate the whole of astrology, has kind of taken me down this tremendous wormhole that I'm so happy to now share with you all. And what an auspicious time to be putting this into the collective. This is a whole new creation that I named True Constellational Astrology for many reasons. And we're going to explore those today. But I'm so excited about this because part of our work with the stars for thousands of years of humanity is to know where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. And this is essentially why astrology was created in the first place, how we could take the cosmic information and start to piece it into our human journey so that we could see patterns, we could predict what was going to happen, and that we could understand the earth, why we're here in these human bodies, and why we feel this profound connection to the stars, as many of us perhaps believe or feel that we come from the stars and that we will actually return to the stars. And so all I know is that from a very early age for me, I used to read the back of the newspaper, and there used to be this lady, this astrologer called Mystic Meg. And Mystic Meg, for some reason, every time I read my star sign, she seemed to know exactly what was happening in my life. And I couldn't understand how this person who's written this paper understood what I was going through. And so from a very early age, I really felt a resonance with astrology. And as most of you know, I never chose to decide to be an astrologer or to even get involved in this field. It wasn't necessarily something that I was thinking that I want to study and I want to do. It was very much a calling from spirit one day that said to me that you need to stop everything and just write this book. And so my journey truly began with that book of 9 months to produce the Lost Octave. And through that, I not only looked at what astrology is now, but what it had been from the ancient Egyptian times. And of course, I've been working with that over the last 3 years, and I came across a stumbling point, because the maps that we're using right now, the astrology that we're using right now, when you start to look at that in comparison to astronomy, which is the science of the stars, the measurements, then there's a disparity between the two. And I really wanted to know, what is the actual truth of what stars we are under? What is the exact alignment? And for 2,000 years, there's been this drift, this shift, splitting apart astronomy and astrology. And of course, way back when you were training to be a philosopher, a polymath, then astronomy and astrology were always merged as one. It was the idea of measuring the stars and measuring the earth, and they were always in harmony. Until we reached a moment where somewhere along the line, it was decided that we were going to stick to what most of you may know as tropical astrology, which is aligned to the solstices and the equinoxes. And it was a beautiful system because it carves the circle into 12 equal segments of 30 degrees each. And it made a lot of sense when it came to learning. But now what's happened is that we are starting to, it's moved over 2,000 years, this shift between what is actually in the stars and what we are looking at when it comes to tropical astrology. So in this venture, really over the last 3 or 4 months, I just went into this wormhole to truly know where we are and to verify and to share in my work where exactly, what is the truth of all of this, and where are we? Where is the baseline to this? Because as some of you may be experiencing, that we could say the moon is in a particular star sign in tropical zodiac, and yet we look outside and we can use like a sky app, or we can just look at the night sky and we see that it's in a different constellation. So then there starts to be this doubt in astrology as to, well, we're saying it's here, but when I look at the night sky, it's there. And so there's a kind of a disharmonic happening in the astrological world between systems. And that's why perhaps many of you started to look towards the Eastern traditions of the Vedic system, what they call sidereal, to find out the calibration of this movement that we call precession. So that to say, through all of this rabbit hole, this deep dive into all of this, I decided to fully merge and create this system to put out into the world as the recalibration. Like any compass or anything that's set to measure, after a time, even clocks can move out of sync. And so if you think about the Earth and the cosmos, it's this huge clock that is moving out of sync to the measurements we have. And so after 2,000 years, it's about time that we recalibrate this to show exactly where we are. And in the pursuit of this, I found some huge calibrations, some huge truths to share with you all and gift you all some insights into this honest pursuit of finding out where exactly we are in this great wheel of life. So one of the parts that I revealed in the Lost Octave book was a reclamation of the missing 13th month. And so this concept isn't necessarily new. This has been throughout many ancient indigenous tribes. There are many stories of the ancient turtle and the 13 hexagrams on the turtle's back. And so when we look into the calendar today, it wasn't always that way. It was also honored in the sacred feminine lunar cycle. And this is where we get the word of month from. Month comes from moon. And so there are 13 moons in a year, 13 months in a year. And so how is this possible? Well, when we look into this calendar, we'll notice that there's a few things that have been left from antiquity, such as the month of September. Well, the word sept means 7, and yet September is our 9th month. When we look at the month of October, this is oct means 8, and yet October is our 10th month. So what happened over many years was a shift in calendar, where it moved more into a solar calendar of 12 equal months to match the tropical zodiac of 12 equal signs. And so when we really truly research this and look into what month is missing, you'll find that it's the month that is called Sol, S-O-L, because it is the alignment month of the solstice. And of course, Sol means the sun. So it's the highest point of the sun. And the dates of this are from June 17th to July 14th. And this is where we are falling in this very month right now. Some interesting facts about this is today is the 172nd day of the year. Well, those of you that have been tracking and working with the Lost Octave know that the number 72 is exactly what the Lost Octave is all about. So for the summer solstice to be 172nd day of the year is pretty profound when we start to see these alignments of numbers. So Sol means the solstice, but it also means the sun. And in music, as it's the lost octave, this is the note G. And so I've spoken about this lunar solar calendar, 13 moons, and how it's calibrated is that it's 13 moons of 28 days. And when we add those together, we get 364 days of the year. And so we might say, well, that's not accurate because what about the last day? Well, the Mayan tradition would say that there is a day out of time. And so that is a day that's counted, but it's a day out of time. And so when we look to different traditions around the world, the Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere, we find these teachings, these sacred teachings of different calendars. And when we can start to find the trends between those calendars, we start to see the truth that every tradition had a certain calibration as they navigated and watched the stars. And so the solstice in the Northern Hemisphere today is the summer solstice, June 21st. And this is the longest day and the shortest night. And in the Southern Hemisphere, the opposite pole, it's the winter solstice of the shortest day and longest night. And so I love looking at this because even astrology takes into consideration the Northern Hemisphere stars. And the Southern Hemisphere stars have really been changed and shifted, and not much of those traditions are still around. We can find them in the originals of Australia. They have some ancient star wisdom. We can see them in the Maori tradition. But that knowledge is not often known or shared, especially into the Western world. And of course, with this global reach that we now have, these teachings are starting to come back, and we're starting to regain some of that ancient knowledge of the Southern Hemisphere stars. And so this is the age of Aquarius that we're moving into, to balance the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, the Northern Hemisphere and the Southern, the East with the West. We truly are moving into this balance within us and the balance with the planet and the stars. It's all moving into this unified field. And this unified field has a code. And that code is the lost octave. So here we can see a traditional zodiac wheel. And the sun is in the center, the earth moving around the sun, all of the planets moving around the sun as the solar system, and the stars are the backdrop. And the stars are often referred to as the fixed stars because they are so far away from us that it perceived that they are static and still. But of course, we know that's also not true. The entire solar system is moving through space at a tremendous speed. And so even when we look at a diagram like this, we tend to think that the middle is moving and the stars are static. But truly, everything is moving. Nothing is still. And so this is where it can be very difficult to draw a line in the sand and understand what is the 0 point of all of this. How do we begin to carve up the night sky into the zodiac and its degrees? And that's why we have different systems. And so we'll know that the tropical zodiac, which is the typical zodiac that has been used for the last 2,000 years, and you'll see everywhere, and what most people refer to. And the tropical zodiac is 12 even signs of 30 degrees each. And as I said, when this comes to looking at the equinoxes and the solstices and the seasons of the earth, then this is a very easy system to learn, and it becomes very manageable to understand. But of course, Mother Nature isn't necessarily uniform in the same way. And so there is something that happens in the stars that you may or may not know called the precession of the equinox. And so precession is the movement through the zodiac signs forwards. So we would begin in Aries and we'd move into Taurus and Gemini and Cancer. And we do this every single year. It's the annual year cycle that we move forwards through the zodiac. But this precession of the equinox is where we move backwards through the signs, or that's how it appears. And so if we were to start in Aries, we actually move into Pisces. And of course, that's the age we're in now, moving back even more so into the age of Aquarius. And so we have this simultaneous counter-rotating spheres. We have the movement forwards and the movement backwards at exactly the same time. And of course, they move in a different ratio. So to understand this movement backwards, another system was created called sidereal astrology. And sidereal astrology is exactly the same as tropical, except it moves backwards with the precession of the equinox. And so these were the two systems that were being used. And sidereal astrology can also be known as Vedic astrology, if you're into that. And so we see the procession here with tropical and the precession here with sidereal. And a lot of astrologers use both of these in unison to figure out where we are in the year and where we are in the great year. And the great year is that precession of the equinox. And so more recently, there was a third system, and it's called True Sky Astrology. And with NASA's awareness or introduction to show that in astronomy, the sun moves through the foot of Ophiuchus as a 13th zodiac constellation. And so when this was put out, there was a lot of panic as to what does this mean? What are the new calibrations? Does this mean it's a new zodiac sign? And NASA's simple answer was, we just share with you the science, the astronomy, which is really nothing to do with signs or zodiac. And so that was kind of an awakening for many people to realize that there's a whole science of the stars that's got nothing to do with understanding what an Aries even means. It has no relevance to that. And so that was where, for me, I could see that there was these two systems that were meant to be one, almost don't even talk to each other. And so True Sky started to involve all of the aspects to tie into a new calibration. So it used 13 signs, and it used the precession of the equinox. And it had another thing. Instead of using this uniform 30 degrees for each sign, it started to say that each constellation was various sizes. And so that is what we're going to use, the size of the constellation itself. And so this is the evolution that has been happening recently, because these calibrations is what's needed, what people are calling for, because what we can see in the night sky compared to what we have in our calculations, there are these differences. So as I mentioned, for 2000 plus years, the Earth, the procession, and the heaven, precession, have drifted. And this is known as the precession of the equinox, and this is known as the great year. And so the great year has a calculation. It takes 25,920 years to go through the great year zodiac. So to go through every constellation in the great year, it takes 25,920. It does this through a particular speed. And this speed is, it moves 1 degree every 72 years. And as you'll notice, this is the number 72 again, which is the number of the lost octave. And so when we multiply 72 by the wheel of 360 degrees, we get 25,920 years. And so this seems that we are starting to find this calibration, but yet as I'm exploring this, I'm finding that there's something not quite right. And so the astrology at the moment, over this 2,000 plus years, has moved backwards in the zodiac 24 degrees according to these three systems. And this is all based upon when we entered the age of Pisces. And so if you can imagine that these three systems agreed that we entered the age of Pisces at a particular date, but that alignment doesn't connect to the astronomy and the science when the science of the stars agreed that we entered the age of Pisces. So in my wanting to merge science and astrology back together again, I went into this full investigation, and that is what birthed the True Constellational Astrology. And through all of my work of reclaiming the ancient star law, the Dendera stone of Egypt, and looking into every single star story and every single constellation, I started to see that actually there should be 14 zodiac signs. And in the Lost Octave book, I actually showed and shared how I was able to qualify and verify this through the astronomical science of the stars. So as I'm looking at these three systems and exploring now the 14th sign, I wanted to find out whether this start date of the true age of Pisces was the same. And what I found was that actually the true age of Pisces means that we have gone through the precession backwards 29 degrees, much further back. That's almost an entire sign in tropical astrology. And so we are almost an entire sign different in calibration. And that chasm, that difference, is why this renaissance of astrology has come and why I have put this into place to be a new calibration that is aligned as a living map to the living sky. And once we have this, forever and a day, we will be able to reference this because it moves with the stars in calibration with the earth. And so there is a difference here of these 5 degrees of over 360 years. Well, that's pretty significant. If you think about where we are right now in our lives, and we think back to what the world was like 360 years ago, that's like referencing a map from back then and experiencing that to be true right now. It just isn't going to happen. And so that's a significant enough marker where I was really pulled to say, okay, now is the time. I never expected to do this. It wasn't part of a vision that I thought was going to be in this path. But right now we are experiencing such a profound shift on the earth that so many people are looking to things like astrology and the stars for answers. And yet, if we are referencing a map that is 360 years old, it's going to be very different to what is actually happening right now in the stars and on the planet. And so I drew out this map for us to see it in a linear form like this. And you'll see that this curved line is the path of the sun. And when you see what parts of the zodiac signs it moves through, this may be a new revelation for you. Because if we look at Scorpio, for example, we'll see that it just about clips this claw of the scorpion. And in the ancient tradition, Scorpio and Libra were actually one constellation, so that the sun would definitely go through this one constellation. And so the zodiac has moved and morphed and changed over the ages to shift in with our calendars and the patterns of the lunar and solar calculations. And so as I observe this, you'll notice also that in Leo, it just about clips the very heart of the lion, Regulus here. And so the solar ecliptic doesn't actually move through the whole of the constellation. It only moves through parts of the constellation. And what's truly fascinating is when we look at Aries, which is this small line here, we'll notice that the ecliptic doesn't move through Aries at all. And so there has been a definition in astrology and the zodiac that the sun must move through the constellation for it to be valid as a zodiac sign. Well, if that was the rule, then Aries would not be a zodiac sign. So could you imagine deleting Aries out of our understanding of the zodiac? How different we would see the stars? So that can't be the rule. There must be a different rule. And that rule I found. And by finding that rule, I understood what qualifies a constellation as a zodiac sign. And none of this I take lightly, and that's why I'm sharing with you all of this openly and transparently so that you can see for yourself, and whatever system you choose to use, then enjoy that system. But I cannot any longer subscribe to the systems that aren't in the true alignment. And so as we look at this movement, you'll notice that these white lines are the astronomical boundaries of the constellations. And it's kind of interesting because they're haphazard looking jagged lines, and yet the entire map of the stars in astronomy, the science, is mapped in this way. And there are certain guidelines of the parameters and the sizes of these boundaries. And so, although astrology has gained in popularity, in the background, astronomy has had billions, if not trillions, of dollars poured into it. The telescopes that we have now can see light years in distance. The observable universe, the maps that we can see now are extraordinary. How we can see the stars and the colors and the nebulas like never before. And so quietly in the background, science has been booming in that area as much as it's been booming in our digital technology. And this, for me, is where we are moving into the technological age with the natural alignment of the natural intelligence. And so both of those can work as one. And so why not use the astronomical calculations to merge back with the mythology and the star lore and the archetypes of astrology? And so you'll notice that right here is where Orion touches the ecliptic, but it's not the whole of Orion. It's actually just the right hand of Orion. And so either side of the ecliptic line here is a band, and that band is a tolerance. Within any system, there is a tolerance, a calculation for expansion and contraction, for an area to qualify. And this area allows for the right hand of Orion to qualify as the missing 1/14th zodiac sign. This now balances the 13th zodiac sign, Ophiuchus, and you'll see here that it is the right leg where the sun moves through in Ophiuchus. And Ophiuchus is directly over Scorpio. And so they kind of battle for this space. And you'll notice this slice of the pie has been allotted to Scorpio, this tiny slice, and a bigger slice to Ophiuchus. Well, there's been a lot of argument about that. There's been a lot of, why are we introducing this? Why not just call it Scorpio and keep it as it is? Well, because when you know the star law of Scorpio, Scorpio evolves through the 8 initiations to become Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer. And so the two stories are linked. And this is what's so beautiful about knowing the ancient mythology with the science, that we can gain a beautiful understanding that we are not losing anything or replacing things. We are just truly looking at this again and recalibrating and incorporating this into one beautiful, unified science. You'll see that there are 2 dots. This red dot here underneath the foot of Ophiuchus, and this red dot here in Orion's hand. And so these 2 areas are hugely significant because underneath the foot of Ophiuchus right here is the galactic center, our portal to the Milky Way. And opposite this 13th sign is Orion. And in the right hand of Orion, right here, is what's known as the anti-galactic center. And that doesn't mean that it's against the galactic center. It means that it's just simply opposite. So this now shows the importance of the balance, because all of the zodiac has its opposite complement. Leo's opposite is Aquarius. Aries opposite is Libra. And so when we use Ophiuchus, then we've been wondering, well, what's its partner? What's its balance? And of course, I revealed that Ophiuchus is actually Sophia, the divine feminine. And the opposite in the star wheel is Orion, that represents the divine masculine. And so now we have the balance of the divine union back into the stars once more, because these 2 constellations represent humanity. And so to incorporate these back into our measurements is so significant at this time. And so you'll see here Ophiuchus, and you'll see the serpent moving through. And right here on the right foot, at this exact point, is the galactic center. And I shared in the Lost Octave that the 13th sign, Ophiuchus, is actually Sophia, the divine feminine. And she is standing on what is known as the golden Stargate of the gods. And so why is there this rise of feminine energy wanting to be integrated back into the collective? Well, because Sophia is standing on the galactic transmission that is beaming to Earth. Everything is coming through the womb of Sophia into our experience. And so she is the guardian of the golden Stargate of the gods. And so the wisdom that's coming in from the galactic core, the galaxy, the greater field, more than just our solar system, she is the one that is sharing that information into humanity at this time. And so opposite this, we have the 14th sign, Orion. And right at this point here, in this alignment with Orion's hand, is the galactic anticenter. This is known as the silver Stargate of humanity. And so we have the Stargate of the gods and the Stargate of humanity. And Orion is taking that galactic wisdom and gifting it to us, to humanity, in an interpretation that we can understand that cosmic soup. And so between them, in union, not against each other, in union, is what is allowing us to experience the inner masculine and inner feminine in balance. And what you'll notice here with Orion is that this placement of the sun is exactly where we are today, the summer solstice. And so this is why it's so important, because normal astrology hasn't made us aware that in Orion's hand, on the summer solstice, in direct alignment with the galactic center, is the sun. And so the right hand is so significant. In esoteric mythology, the right hand of God, the being on the right hand side of the throne of God, is an esoteric, it's the pinnacle of life. It's as close as you can get to the divine. That's how it's shared in its mythology. So for the sun at the summer solstice to be in Orion's hand, and for us to not know that, is a huge shame, because this alignment of Sophia being at the winter solstice and Orion being at the summer solstice, this alignment is a once in a lifetime span of years. This only happens once every 25,920 years. And your life right now is part of that great play. And so this is why I've embarked on this journey, for us to see this, that our lives are about this balancing of union, the masculine and feminine, not just to the earth, but to the galactic core, all in alignment to one frequency. And that frequency is the lost octave harmonics of 72. So I wanted to share the new dates, the new findings of this 14th zodiac sign, because perhaps you were born within this caption, these caption dates, and this is going to shift what constellation that you were actually born under. And so this may feel revolutionary, that there's just this huge new calibration, but that's because we haven't documented for 2,000 years this incremental shift. And now it's moved 29 degrees. It feels like we're having this huge recalibration. But truly, this is what it's always been. And we're just realizing that, revealing that. And so I'm going to take you through a little bit about Orion and its story, so we can see the importance of why we should reinstate this and why I've placed this into true constellational astrology. And so here you'll see that Orion is the right hand of God, and it's Orion's right hand that qualifies as part of the ecliptic. So from June 9th to June 23rd. So this will be the traditional view of Orion. This is very Greco-Roman, but this is only part of his story. And Orion has had many faces over many thousands of years, all around the world in every tradition. And so I'm going to introduce you to some of these now. Orion's origins in Egypt is Osiris, and we'll speak more about his story to Osiris and the resurrection symbolism of Orion. In the angelic kingdom, this is the archangel Michael that defeats the devil. And the symbolism of the warrior, or the armored warrior, the peaceful warrior that overcomes the darkness. This is a continued trend when it comes to Orion that is known as this warrior archetype. And so in the Christian traditions, that we'll see that this is Saint George defeating the dragon, the same symbolism as Archangel Michael defeating the devil. In the Celtic tradition, he's known as Lu, and Lu is known as Lu the long arm, because it is Orion's right hand that is seen as this disproportionate long arm, this right arm, and it's often holding a weapon or spear. And so Lu the long arm is the same symbology of Orion, and Orion means light and Lu means light. And so the same traditions, just different names, different characters, different faces. In another tradition, he is known as the winter hunter, or even the fairy king, that would go on the winter hunt at the winter solstice, because in the northern hemisphere, you would see Orion high up in the sky. And at the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, this was a time of great magic when the fairy king would come out and he would chase away the bad energy to birth the new coming of the new year. In the Vedic tradition, this is known as Nataraja. This is Shiva Shakti, the cosmic dancer. And this merging of masculine and feminine as one is what the ancient Vedic tradition saw Orion as. And what you might notice is that this is the same symbolism that is placed as a statue outside of CERN in Switzerland. And it's about the notion of creation and destruction as one, as birth and death and resurrection. And so this cosmic dance is being made in the stars by Orion. And here we have in the Sumerian tradition that, again, this great, strong hunter warrior that would protect the people, that under the star sign of Orion, that humanity could be safe. Other traditions may view it as a time of battle or being at war, but that was never its traditional use. It was about balance and protecting that which is most sacred. In the Babylonian tradition, we see the same thing of, again, holding objects or weapons such as a staff or a hook. And all of these are emblems of the internal process of the body, because the staff represents the spine and the hook at the end represents our journey into the crown and the third eye. And so this is why you'll see items like Osiris holding the items across his body that represent the transcendence or integration of higher consciousness. This was a beautiful find for me as I discovered that this idea of the one who holds the lance, or the one that holds the lance in the right hand, in the Grail traditions and the ancient knights, would be Sir Lancelot. And that's mirrored in another story of the Christian biblical tradition of Longinus. Longinus that speared Christ in the side. And so by doing that, in that moment of piercing the sun, or the Son of God, that he awoke to his Christ consciousness. And so this idea of piercing the sun is the same emblem of the sun in our solar system when it moves into the alignments of the solstices and equinoxes. And so the spear is seen as the lines between equinoxes and solstices, the same as the sacred sword, such as Excalibur. And so this reoccurring theme of the warrior with a weapon and this movement of becoming a warrior and then moving into redemption, evolving out of the warrior archetype into Christ consciousness or a higher consciousness, is the story of Orion going through the zodiac. He was also known as a giant, and you'll see many ancient Native American depictions or other native depictions of this disproportionate hand and arm reaching up into the ecliptic where the sun passes. And so Orion was seen as this giant man, this larger than life, this sort of Goliath archetype. And of course, the stories of David and Goliath are all connected to Orion. And here we'll have an Arabic story of Al-Jabbar, and again, holding these weapons or items to show the motion and transcendence of understanding ourselves through our spine into higher consciousness. We might recognize this symbol here of the three wise men, and even these three African women that are all representatives of the belt stars. And of course, at the winter solstice, we'll see the three wise men rising that guide us to the Star of Bethlehem. And of course, that is all of that Christ mythology with the Son of God. In the Spanish tradition and even the Americas, this can be interpreted as the three Marys that made the pilgrimage and sailed to France. And so this idea of Orion's belt and now Orion's hand are all starting to make sense and paint a story throughout all traditions. The Chinese viewed Orion and his belt as Shen, and Shen meaning spirit, the life force energy. And so Orion on a deeper level represents the divine masculine energy principle that is within everybody. And of course, this is where we'll see Orion's placement in that spring-summer shift when the sun is in its full capacity. The Native American traditions also saw this as a Native American holding a bow and arrow as its weapon. And of course, that tradition has been seen in our modern culture that he's normally either holding a club or he's an archer like Robin Hood, or this Native American holding the bow and arrow. In the Armenian tradition, we'll see the same archetype of the warrior holding the bow and arrow or holding the weapon of protection and liberation as it moves through the journey of the zodiac. And so these are stories that are representative of us moving through the processional annual year, but more so the precession of the great year of the ages. Even in Indonesia, you'll see that there are these three men, or these three auspicious beings, three energies, again, representative of the belt stars of Orion. Again, in the Vedic tradition, we have Migra or Mrigashira, and this is where we start to see that the archetype starts to shift into animals and objects, and Orion was seen as a stag's head with antlers. And of course, the white stag is a very significant blessing in ancient fairy tales as being a descendant from the divine, or being gifted down from the divine as a messenger. We'll see here in Australia, the originals saw Orion as a pot. And so every different culture saw the same stars and applied their culture to that to gift them teachings. And so the pot is a container of energy, a container of water. A container is our body. Our body is a container for the spirit. And that's how the originals of Australia saw this symbol. It's also been seen as an hourglass in its shape of constellation, turning the wheels of time. It's also been seen as the Damaru drum, which is that similar chalice type hourglass shape. The rhythms of life. And the rhythms of life are used through the beating of the drum through our hands. And so in the Native American tradition, one of the symbols is that Orion was known as the hand of God, which only confirmed my own discoveries of the realization that the right hand is where the sun passes at the summer solstice. Even traditions like the tarot, Orion is the Fool card. You can actually see the same alignment here of Orion and the belt that points down to the dog. And if you look at that in the stars, the dog that the belt stars point down to is Sirius, the dog star. And so even in our tarot symbolism, we have the star constellations and Orion, the Fool that begins the entire journey through the tarot to realize the world. And who is at the end of the world but Sophia, the mother of the entire zodiac. And so Orion, the 0 point that begins the heroic journey, ends up as Sophia as the world card, which is Ophiuchus. And so they are linked as the beginning and the end and the beginning, the Alpha and Omega. And most recently, being here in Indonesia, it's very much about the monkey energy here. And this is a Chinese mythology that I just discovered and realized that this monkey king, the story of the monkey king, this ancient Chinese mythology, is actually the story of Orion. And it's the same symbolism. This monkey king who has this profound abilities, that starts out as a warrior, that holds the staff of the spine, goes through these transformations. And as he goes through these transformations, he moves to become immortal. And so the story of Sun Wukong is the same interpretation as Orion moving through the zodiac. And of course, the Holy Grail is the same shape, the same idea of the pot, the chalice, the vessel, the human body that holds the spirit, the Shen. And so the stars are really reflections of us. They are our guidance map for us to look there in order to remind us to look inside. And as we will find the same constellations in the night sky, we also can see the same constellations in our own molecular DNA and our genetics. And so, in essence, our bodies, our experience right now, we are the living grail that spirit is within. And so, this is why this wisdom is so important to bring back. Because Orion is the symbol of the return of the Grail Kings. Because as soon as I saw that the sun was in the right hand, I saw that it was Orion, instead of holding the weapon in the right hand, which is a symbol of the divine masculine, he is holding the Grail, the symbol of the divine feminine, in the right hand. And so he is the protector of that which is most sacred, which is the Grail, which is the divine feminine mysteries. That's everything the ancient knights were fighting for, to hold that sacred wisdom of the Grail, of the feminine that births humanity into the world. And so there's this balance of the sword of Excalibur, the masculine, and the Grail, the feminine. The two go hand in hand. And this is exactly what Orion is showing us. And so this return of the Grail King and the Grail Kings at the summer solstice is so auspicious. As I mentioned, this is a once cycle every 25,920 years. And your life right now is in this exact auspicious alignment. And so this journey brings us back to the fundamentals of the human body, the human experience, the divine proportion. Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, that has around it here the circle and the square. And so what does this truly mean? Well, the square represents Earth. It's 360 degrees. It represents the earthly procession, the movement forwards through the zodiac. And the circle represents heaven. It is also 360 degrees, representing the precession of the equinox. And so when these two are combined, Earth and heaven, the square and the circle, it creates 720 degrees, a tetrahedron. And this 720 degrees is the lost octave number 72. Another thing that correlates into this is Orion as the 14th zodiac sign. Because you'll see here that Da Vinci cut the Vitruvian Man at these marker points here and all throughout his body into exactly 14 parts. So the body can be cut into 14 parts. Orion, being the 14th sign, is the fulfillment of the human body in correlation with the earth and heaven. And so we are that bridge. We have the two spinning discs of 360 degrees that make 720, and these 14 body parts, the 14 zodiac signs. When all of this aligns, we create this unified field. And so this is an ancient story, because Orion's story as Osiris was cut into 14 parts by his brother Set. And Set had 72 disciples. or 72 henchmen. Isn't that very interesting that this ancient mythology of numbers is repeating the same correspondences over and over again? So these 72 henchmen of Set, the brother, cuts Osiris into 14 parts. These numbers are telling us the ratios. And of course, Osiris's body was scattered all around Egypt. And Isis, who is Sophia, the 13th zodiac sign, she went around and gathered 13 parts. But yet there was this one missing 14th part. And this is exactly what's happened in our astrology, that we reclaimed the 13th as Isis. And because of that, Isis can resurrect the divine masculine, the missing 1/14th, and put the divine proportion back together again. And so this is where we have the Vesica Pisces, Vesica Piscis, as the dual wheel, the two globes, the two circles, the terrestrial earth and celestial heavens. And these two circles of 360 create 720, 72, the divine number. This is the ratio, the divine proportion of sphering the cube or circling the square. And this ratio is 8 to 9. And 8 times 9 is 72. So in my journey of exploration, everywhere I look, every calibration that I take, I'm finding the same numbers, the same mythology, and this story is playing out at our time, in our lives right now, in this alignment of an auspicious 25,920 years. So even more so, it is so important that we understand where we are and what the stars and the earth and our bodies are trying to teach us. And as we move into that alignment, we move into the music of the universe. And of course, the universe means the one song. It was always meant to be this one song. And if we could hear it and move into its alignment, then we get to be carried on that current through into the new age. I hope you're enjoying this quest and journey through it. And I have to say, this has been a huge challenge, but it has been one of the most exciting processes that I've done. And perhaps the biggest challenge, because recalibrating the whole of astrology with astronomy is no small task. And there are so many things that I learned through this. And one of those things was that we like to think that everything is in these perfect circles. But of course, the truth is that everything's more like an elliptical, that it's kind of more squishy in places. And so the sun and the earth, the wobble between them, there's actually quite a bit of difference in terms of the sun and the stars and the earth. And so to find how to calibrate all of that into one harmony was quite a task. But I'm so happy to share and say that this is now complete and done. And I wanted to give up on this process so many times, because when you're looking at these calculations, and this is within 0.1 of a degree of these calculations, it is so fine that being out by a few degrees means a few years, which over 2,000 years can be 5 or 1,000 years. And so it's so important to really be aligned through all the different facets of this, so that this clock, this synchronicity, will stay in tune forever after this point. So the two schools of thought astronomy, the science of the stars, and astrology, the star law of the stars. And I love to think about this as astronomy is the measurements, and then astrology is the interpreter of those measurements. It gives it meaning. It pulls it into the human experience. And this, of course, is where we speak about archetypes and the psychology and the traits of someone being born under certain stars. But as I'm sharing in here, that right now, the current tropical astrology has really nothing to do with the actual star placements of where they are. And even sidereal that tracked the precession, that is also not aligned because it's not the various degrees. And even with True Sky, it has various degrees and precession, but it's based upon an origin date, which is over 360 years in difference. So I wish there was a system that I could just use and be like, great, this is all calculated, but there wasn't. And so it was my quest to answer this for myself. And then it just blossomed into this new astrology that I felt called to share with everybody and to start to put this into the field as the new calibrations. And so I like to think about it in this romanticized way of two star-crossed lovers, astronomy and astrology, merges science and story in union once more. I love that, science and story. And we know that facts and figures, we need those for our accuracy. And then from that accuracy, we can start to weave the narrative, the new stories. We can embrace the old and weave in the new for our time. But if we don't know where we are and we don't have the right coordinates, then our stories are also going to be in dissonance to what we are feeling and what is happening on the earth. And so something pretty profound happened just as I was about to present this today. I love to look into the synchronicities of the words, the letters, the degrees. Everything has a correspondence to it. And so when I looked at the actual letters of true constellational astrology and converted them into numbers, then when you add all of this up, true constellational astrology adds to the number 365, the 365 days in a year. And so I could not believe that the very words and letters that were chosen for this new offering were exactly the number of days in a year. And then, of course, even more so, we add up 3, 6, and 5. And what do we get? 14. The 14 zodiac signs. And then I was like, this is just an unbelievable synchronicity. Let's go one step deeper. What is the 1 + 4 correlation? Well, 5 degrees times 72 gives us 360 degrees, the entire wheel. So you know something's in alignment when even the words and the numbers and the mathematics are working in what you're actually calling this new thing. And so that was just something fun to show you my process and my journey of everywhere I look, I'm finding the same pattern, the same frequency, the same octave over and over and over again. And so when you start to see that in every single facet, then you start to realize that the universe is telling you quite a strong message. And so here it is. Here is the new 14 sign zodiac. of various degrees aligned to precession and precession of the equinox. And you'll see this slice of pie of Orion. And so we still have the same order of the zodiac of Aries, Taurus, and in between Taurus and Gemini is where Orion sits. And remembering that it's the right hand of Orion that qualifies where the Grail is. And then we have the same after Gemini and Cancer and Leo. We move into Virgo, and you'll see that Virgo is a huge sign. It occupies over 40 degrees in the sky. And so if we were to use 30 degrees, that means that we're 10 degrees off from what is actually happening in the night sky. And so 10 degrees is a huge difference, especially when we're speaking about the great year. Then we have Libra, and as I mentioned, Scorpio being this small slice of the pie. But truly, we could say that Scorpio and Ophiuchus really are one. And Ophiuchus here, I've renamed as Sophia because it's actually in the name Ophiuchus itself. If you take the S at the end of Ophiuchus and place it at the beginning, which is the law of octaves, the end is the beginning, then you'll find that it spells the word Sophie. And it actually spells the word Ophiuchus. And then I looked up, what does Yuku mean? Yuku means universe. So Ophiuchus, when you move the S, means Sophia's universe. Well, that's pretty profound considering that she sits at the galactic center right now in our lifetime. Then we move into Sagittarius. The same thing. Capricorn is the same, into Aquarius. And again, Pisces, because of its V-like nature, creates another very large constellation. And so this is where the age of Pisces is quite long in its age. And we kind of feel like we're in the age of Aquarius, but kind of also finishing up Pisces. And I'll show you if you want to join into the next iteration of all of this, how I managed to prove through the stars that we are actually in both constellations at the same time. So this is the world's first 14 zodiac wheel, calibrated to the astronomical and astrological alignments, to the precession of the equinox, to the exact start date of the age of Pisces. Everything here is calibrated to the exact octaves and precision of where we are. And from this map, we can now make the measurements that we are all looking for. And so True Constellational Astrology fulfills one of the most ancient esoteric riddles of Egyptian mythology. And that is the union of Isis resurrecting Osiris to complete the missing 1/14. Why has that story stayed in antiquity all this time? Why is it speaking to these numbers? Because this was the prophecy for the future of humanity, to discover the divine feminine in this galactic alignment. And by doing that, knowing that the stars work in pairs, it automatically resurrects the missing 1/14, Orion. And now we have this beautiful balance in the wheel. And although these constellations are various sizes, this is a link to how nature views life, that everything is equal in its energy, in its offering, in its consciousness. Just because something is larger and something is smaller doesn't mean that it has a bigger or lesser significance necessarily. And so it's an equality of difference. And I feel that's a very profound teaching of the Aquarian Age, where every single person has various skill sets and qualities and something to contribute. And it may be something very small, even into your own family, or it may be something very large, something into the collective. But every single piece, no matter how big or small, is a contribution to completing this collective consciousness. And so by seeing this natural pattern, these various constellations are the boundaries of the natural pattern of what we see in the night sky. And so we're moving actually more into the natural harmonics of nature than we are the man-made equal sections. And it's easy to learn when it's something that's very even and we slice it evenly and it feels very equality is there between all the signs. But that's not how nature is. Like the Fibonacci pattern, it moves in a ratio, moves in a harmonic. And so now we have this beautiful map to work with. So if we take that map and we spin it 29 degrees, which is the precession of the equinox, we shall see at the spring equinox whereabouts exactly where we are in our age. So this is the solstice line. We have the winter solstice above and the golden gate of the gods. And remembering I was saying that it's underneath the right foot of Sophia. And so we can say, well, why is this in Sagittarius? Well, the right foot of Sophia right here, the galactic center is actually just inside Sagittarius. So it's right here between the two of them. And opposite that, as we follow the solstice down, we'll see that it's exactly on Orion. And as I showed you before, that the sun right now on the summer solstice, if you were to use any astrological app, you could see that the sun is exactly in the right hand of Orion today. So this is the solstice line, and this is the equinox line. And this right here is exactly where we are. And so we have this much left of the age of Pisces. So that seems quite significant that we have that much to go. And so when we dive deeper, if you want to continue learning about all of this and all of the exact degrees and how this is all calibrated, I'll actually be sharing with you how long this period is, how many years we have until we enter the age of Aquarius, and of course, how you can calibrate your actual birth chart to all of these new calculations. So you have the winter solstice, the gate of the gods, and right here in Orion is the silver stargate of humanity. And the balancing force of equal day and equal night is here, and this is our age. If we were to draw a map, we would be in exactly this part of the constellation of Pisces right now. So this is the great part. This is the part that you get to see your participation in this grand weave. For the first time ever, I'm sharing these new calculations to the exact dates of true constellational astrology. And so the beginning of the astrological new year is often seen as Aries, but 0 degrees Aries in the true constellational astrology begins actually at the 19th of April. So you can see that it's almost a month different from the spring equinox. That's because of this precession of the equinox shift. So if you're born between April 19th and May 13th, you would be Aries. And from May 14th to June 8th, you would be Taurus, and so on. And so Orion begins June 9th and it ends June the 22nd. And of course, today we are June the 21st. And so you can see the importance of why we need to have the 14th zodiac sign to know exactly where we are, because this sign is the summer solstice. So I would love to know, maybe you want to share in the chat whether you've changed sign, whether you've felt perhaps within you that you've always had a resonance with this different sign. Also would love to know if some of you had stayed the same, because some of the constellations like Virgo and Pisces are quite big and large. And so you may potentially still be the same sign. But most often than not, almost every single person will be one sign back. So for me, my whole life I was believing that I was a Pisces, and then I create this and I discover that actually I've always been right on the cusp, that I have been within one day an Aquarian. And so that was kind of revolutionary for me, that all of my work is based around the Aquarian Age and the movement from Pisces to Aquarius. And yet through this calibration, I discovered that my day, my birthday, my solar return is the last day of Aquarius before it turns to Pisces. And then it made a whole load of sense to me as to why I love the ocean and I love the dolphin energy. But for me to be in the air and to that dream to fly, because Aquarius is fixed air. And so I wondered why people would often assume and be like, wow, you must be like a dolphin and love to dive under the ocean. And I'm like, not at all. And yet I love to be up in the sky and fly and that rush of wind. And now it all makes sense. And so I would love to know, as I see there's 72 comments right now in the chat, that what star sign this now aligned you to, and also how do you feel about this? Because this is the calibration. This is the calibration of what is actually happening in the stars, and this is the calibration of what you were actually born under also. So this isn't something that's new. This is just what it has always been. And we just haven't known this calibration. So a lot of great synchronicities happened when I started to see this, and maybe for you also. And with this, a new implementation of the archetypes. We are going to redefine and look at the new traits and connections of the archetypes, because we're introducing 14 zodiac signs, but also what we first perceived as Aries is now different. And what we thought a Taurus was about is now different because of these calibrations. And so this is a really exciting time that we get to recalibrate and redefine and look at this through fresh eyes in these new degrees and dates. So I'm super excited about it, because this is going to give us such a validation, because astrology has been very hit and miss for many people. A lot of people think it's fortune telling, think it's woo-woo, just think it's sort of some mythical archetypes, and it has no relevance to actual scientific data. And so by linking these two now, this is absolutely scientifically aligned. And so we now get to look at that new data through fresh eyes. And that's the joy of an astrologer. The joy of an astrologer is like being Joseph in his Technicolor Dreamcoat, being the dream interpreter of a whole new world. And so we get to try this on and try this out and start to look at the seasons, look at the stars, and weave the previous inner standings into our new collective inner standing. So I'm super excited about this because you can just learn about the new calibrations just as through the astronomy and astrology. You can learn about the degrees and you'll be able to see your new placements in the new degrees. And you can just, if you're interested in just the astrology part, you can just learn that. And I'll be teaching all of that and all of the information. There is nothing in this that I am withholding. I'm going to be sharing every single to 0.1 of a degree. You're going to know the truth and see all of this laid out so clearly. A second part of my work, as you know, is within the Lost Octave, is to link the 72 Stargates of the I Ching that only most recently I was finally managed to 100% prove this mathematically and scientifically through the genetics and calculations, that there were always 72 hexagrams within the I Ching. And my latest course with the mirror codes that some of you are in as well are now seeing that process and seeing that validation. And so I've linked the 72 Stargates, hexagrams, into the new calibrations. And there's a conversion chart of if you're used to a system that has used the I Ching with astrology, such as human design, then you're going to learn about the expansion into the 72 wheel and then the movement into true constellational astrology. So the Stargates and the astrology are now combined, so you can start to find out the true Stargates of your astrology. So this is a really beautiful time because there's a particular harmonic that's moving through all of this. I mentioned that the Lost Octave 72, I've showed you the 14 Zodiac signs. I've shown you the precession of the Equinox, how it's aligned to number 72. And of course, the I Ching also, because with 72 hexagrams, there are 6 lines. And when you multiply 72 by 6, you end up with the natural tuning harmonic of the Earth of 432. And 432 is an octave of 72. And so this universal octave of 72 moving into 144, the 144,000 spoken of in the book of Revelation, that moves into 216, doubling of the octave. Well, 216 is the measurement of the moon. We double 216, we end up with 432, which is the natural harmonic of the Earth. And we double that again, and we end up with 864, which is the diameter of the sun. And if we keep going up, we'll find that we'll hit the great year number, 25,920. And if we double that again in an octave, we end up with this number, 5184. Well, if we place a decimal point in there, 51.84 degrees is the actual slope angle of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Great Pyramid of Giza, if you use a scale of 432, you'll find the calibration and measurements of the entire Earth. Now, I don't know about you, but when you start to see that all of these numbers are linking to one of the most sacred monuments on the Earth, that monument on the Earth gives us the dimensions of the Earth, and that they knew the dimensions of the Earth thousands of years ago, and they left it in stone in mathematics. And then these ancient myths of Egypt, of Osiris and Set, they're all linking to these numbers, and these numbers are now calibrating into this one beautiful wheel. And this wheel is connected to our DNA, it's connected to the stars, it's connected to the I Ching. Everything in one place. Finally, we have a unified system. And so I really felt the call to share this and offer this as a small, short course, very accessible for everybody, to come and learn all of this, to learn all of the degrees, to be shown. And all of these diagrams, I hand draw every single one of them because they are so accurate to 0.1 of a degree. And if they are out by even just 1 degree, it shifts the entire wheel into the wrong calibration. So to have the exact diagrams and the exact degrees and alignments for all of this is so important. And so all of this is hand-drawn, hand-measured. You're going to get all of the diagrams. You're going to know every single thing about this. You're going to be able to look at your own astrology. And if you want to dive into the hexagrams and the Stargates, the 72, you can do that also. So I wanted to make this available for astrologers and also people that are into the system of the I Ching also. Wherever you're coming from, this has everything you need: the science, the astrology, and also the calibrations to the hexagrams. So it's a 4-week course online. It starts July 21st, so a month from now. And I'm offering it at the early degree offer of $297 for the 4 weeks. It's going to be a recorded course, but we're going to do it live once a week for 4 weeks. And they're going to be 2-hour live calls with me, and you can ask any questions in there. We have a private Facebook group that you can ask any questions and also share in that community anything that you want about your own journey through these new calibrations, or just building this community that's moving into this recalibration. So this early degree offer is going to be up for the next week or so. And I really want people to come into this with this joy and this open-mindedness of that maybe you felt that there's something that's not quite right about the astrology right now, and you've been looking for this system that is tying in these ancient prophecies, then this is for you. It's all here. And all of my work from this point onwards will be calibrated to this, because this is what is truly aligned. And you can look on the website, you can read more about it. I have a Facebook page that you can look into the chat, and I'm sure my wife Juliet is putting the links to all of this in there as well. And just look on the website, read through it, and trust your timing, trust the feeling of this. If this feels too much, too overwhelming for you, then just let it be and allow the timing to happen. If you feel that you really want to move into this and discover what this is all about, then it's right here. And we're going to be doing it starting from next month. And it's going to be a really profound journey through all of this. It's such an exploration because we are redefining these archetypes. And these archetypes haven't been redefined for 2,000 plus years. So it's going to be really interesting that our lives and our habits, our ways, the way in which spirit and life moves through us, it's going to be a beautiful conversation of what is actually a true Sagittarius, what is actually a true Capricorn, because the reference point that we've had has been 29 degrees different. So we get to redefine this, rework this. And as I say, from this point onwards, for the rest of our lives, this is the calibration that is going to be available. So it's really an exciting time. And I want to invite this in as an exploration. For me, I've really found so many profound revelations already. And I wanted to bring this to the collective. I wanted to share this narrative because I feel it's so important, and it can make such a huge difference when it comes to us not only learning our own birth charts, but learning how the entire cosmos is working with the earth. And so, of course, through astrology, we often get into it to discover things about ourselves. But for those of you that have been deeply into this process, perhaps for many years and much longer than myself, you'll start to see and know that it's often actually about how we can start to interpret the collective and help the collective come into these inner standings. And so we're going to be going through every star sign, all of the measurements, and start to play and enjoy this new exploration that has never been done before. And so I love being on the pioneering precipice of this. And maybe to some people, this is disconcerting. Maybe this may feel that you lose a bit of orientation, but that's all right. As we move into this recalibration, you are redefining your foundations and really knowing that this is going to be the alignment for the rest of your life. And I think that's a very profound thing to know where we exactly are in this great play of life. And so in this review, the summer solstice Stargate in the lost octave is the 15.2, and you'll see this down here. And in the lost octave, there is what I call the quadrinity psychology. And it's the psychology of every single Stargate. And so I looked this up today to be like, well, what is the 15.2? What does it mean? What's it about? And to my delight, it's about inclusivity. That is its highest energy that it holds. That Stargate, this alignment of the summer solstice, is about inclusivity. Every fractal part, every person, every zodiac sign, the earth, the heavens, the DNA, everything, it's all welcome. It's all here to be enjoyed and explored and looked at. And so this is not about right and wrong. This is just about what truly is. And this is really what true constellational astrology means. It's what truly is here. And so as we move through this process of inclusivity, we have this integration of courtesy, to be courteous to everything, to nature, to life itself, to each other, to include each other as this great global universal family. And this is the transformation that's needed to transform isolation. Perhaps many of you, especially right now, are feeling isolated. Maybe even looking into your astrology and the calibrations, maybe you don't feel that you've been seen. Maybe you don't feel that you truly resonate with the systems that have gone before. And so knowing this is the true star alignment, I hope that this is starting to move us out of isolation and transform that into inclusivity, that you are a beautiful piece and an essential piece of this great wheel. And then, of course, the embodiment of all of that is our communion. It has the word union in there. It is our communion with life. and everything about life and everyone in life. And I don't know about you, but right now across the planet, I think we need more inclusivity and communion and the transcendence and transformation of isolation more than ever, to give ourselves the courtesy, the space, the respect, and the love to hear each other and to share and create these discussions and to move into these alignments together. And so all of this is a collective movement for each one of us to try this on, to work with this, and to shift, truly shift into this new Aquarian inner standing. So I want to conclude this sharing today, and I thank you so much for being with me through this journey. There's been so much to share and so much more to share, but I hope this gives you an insight into what I've been doing in the background with many other things and more offerings to come. But this one is very significant because after today, I just want you to invite you into this question and this realization that your lifetime is just 1 degree in the great year of the ages. So wouldn't you want to know the true alignment you are born to live? Your lifetime is just 1 degree in this great year of the ages, the great play, the grand weaving of life. You get 1 degree for your life. Wouldn't you want to know what 1 degree alignment that is? Because this is your time. You are born in this alignment at this time for a reason. Whatever that reason is, that's our exploration. And if you don't want to know and you just want to live, then that is also a beautiful thing. And it's that enjoyment of just being with life and living and not worrying about any alignments, any astrology. That's so beautiful also. But when we start to speak about that we're in the age of this and under this star alignment and these dates, we truly need a calibration. And for me to know what 1 degree I'm living, it really pulls things into perspective. And it allows me to feel the energy of this moment, of what is happening with the stars and the earth. And as everything is changing in such a quick speed, we look to the stars for that guidance. We commune with Mother Nature for the guidance of how to move forward in alignment with the natural movement. And so that is your question. And this is the final statement. As above, so below, as it truly is. This is true constellational astrology. As above, so below, as it truly is. So, whether I see you in the course or whether I just see you in more of these lives, I thank you for being here and being with me and spending your time. And I hope that you feel that you've gleaned some insights, even if it's just of something of interest, or you feel that deeper resonance to really dive deep into this and know this new alignment. So you can find out all about this, and you can purchase the course on thelostoctave.com/true constellational. I look forward to seeing you in the course. If you're new to any of my work, then please have a look on the website. You'll see really about my journey, my my life journey into this and this kind of crazy, amazing epiphany that happened in Lionsgate in 2023, and how this journey of discovering these ancient lost things, for some reason, it seems to be my life is to discover and to reclaim these lost ancient things and to bring them into these new calibrations, and for us to find these unified fields. And there can be like a treasure trove of information. And I would say almost it seems like every single week I'm sharing new revelations, new calibrations, new discoveries, new connections in all sorts of fields, as I love the polymath wisdom of the philosopher of looking through all different aspects of geometry and DNA. And it's a fascinating journey to go on. And so if you're interested in that, please check out the website, have a read. There's so many different courses for different opportunities, and there's going to be more to come. But for tonight, I really thank you for joining and being in the energy of the summer solstice. This is the peak of the sun. And so this is a time to truly see everything. Imagine standing on top of the mountain with full lights on. You can see the entire world, the entire cosmos. And so it's an opportunity just to look at everything. Just take that moment to feel, just to look, and just to then move into the rest of the year into an alignment that feels good. And if that alignment aligns you into True Constellational Astrology, I'll be so great to welcome you in, and looking forward to meeting you and discussing all about this new shift. And for those of you that are in the other courses, I will see you in there. And for everybody else, I will be continuing to do more lives and more shares. And so I hope that you felt that you've gleaned some value, some energy, some insight into this that you can sit with and work with. And of course, I'm on social media. You can just follow on Instagram and Facebook as well, and just keep up to date with what's going on. But thank you so much for being here. Sending you so much love, and these beautiful summer solstice and winter solstice blessings from here in the Southern Hemisphere. So great to see all of your faces. Thank you for your questions and shares, and I will speak to you soon. Happy summer solstice, everybody.